Hi, my name is Matt Viebrock. I'm the owner and founder of Let's Grow COO. We're a fractional COO company training executive assistants how to grow into the COO role within your organization. So today what we're going to be covering is some of the reasons why you might be burned out in your business and how hiring an executive assistant can help you alleviate a lot of those issues. So take a listen. Hope it helps.
Welcome to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owners Association, where real estate investors have found success since 1968. I'm your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group. This episode is sponsored by Green Property Management, managing everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area. Find out more at greenpropertymgt.com. And RCB & Associates, helping real estate investors and small business owners navigate the complex world of health insurance and Medicare benefits at rcbassociatesllc.com. Get ready for the Midwest Real Estate Investor Conference in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Join hundreds of real estate investors for networking, learning, and growth. Be sure to mark your calendars for April 24th and 25th of 2025. Hello and welcome to episode 462. One of the common denominators between the successful guests that we've had on this show is their ability to systematize, streamline, and scale their businesses in order to increase their revenue. But building a team and processes that allow you to do that can be quite daunting. Hiring a chief operating officer or COO can help accelerate your growth, but paying a full-time salary is out of the question for many investors and business owners. Today, we're going to discuss COOs as well as executive assistants and what they do, how they can help you, and how finding one might be easier than you think. My guest is Matt Viebrock, founder of Let's Grow COO, who helps real estate entrepreneurs streamline and scale their businesses to make more net profit. Matt, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Since you've made this your business, can you kind of tell us the challenges that you see real estate investors and entrepreneurs out there facing and some of the solutions that you've kind of put in place along the way?
Some of the biggest challenges we're seeing right now is there's a lot of people who have gotten into the business and they decide that they want to scale, and scale has a lot of different connotations to it, right? So we've all seen those people who, post on, YouTube and Facebook with the flashy cars and the big checks and everything like that. And there's a lot of people who want to get that. But really, in order to grow your business, you have to do it in a responsible way. Otherwise, it can be all like a house of cards that comes toppling down, right? So we're very, very big about making sure that you set the foundation for your company properly and eventually scaling responsibly, right? So that's really one of the big things I'm very passionate about talking about. So when it comes to that, it really depends on the size of your business and kind of what you're looking to do. The majority of the folks that we typically tend to work with are house flippers, wholesalers. We do have some rental property owners as well. But the main thing is focusing on setting a foundation of good systems, procedures, processes, and making sure you start with what's a good mission, vision, and value statement that you have for your company, right? It's hard to get people to follow you and to scale your company unless you have those things in place. From there, we start to look at, okay, what kind of strategies are we looking at building? What's our main avatar that we're going after as well? And then starting to build a plan around that in terms of how we're going to get there. So a lot of times when most entrepreneurs start out, they might hire a couple of VAs from overseas. They might hire their mom or their girlfriends, or some other random person just kind of that they pick up off the street or off Craigslist. And if you can fog a mirror, you got the job essentially. So, but that's really not the best way to scale your business, right? So we're all about kind of having different phases of growth that we focus on, and then adding layers upon layers, as we start to go. But only, again, like once we've only built that foundation up properly. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's a start.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic start, Matt. Thanks for explaining that. And I want to, when we talk about COOs and virtual executive assistants, they can definitely help. But I want to dig into what you just said, because we talk a lot about systems and processes on the show. And you talked about the steps you kind of start with, laying out that mission, purpose, and value statement, which sounds great, but not many people get that right. So just dig into that a little bit. Like, what is a real mission, purpose, and value statement to you?
For the way we look at it is, if you want people to essentially, if you want to grow your world to have other people fit inside of it, you have to be able to be a good leader. And the only way to do that is to have a purpose and a mission that they can follow behind you, right? So that's why we always start off with that first, because if you, like I said, if you don't have a good vision for where you want your company to go over the next couple of years, how do you expect anybody to follow you along, right? So for us, a mission statement is really about like, what's our purpose? What are we, who are we trying to serve in the market, right? And then internally, what's our vision for the future of where we're trying to go with this? And then what are the values that we ascribe to every single day, right? So the values need to be, 3 to 5 bullet points that, just at your core, that's what you and everybody else in your company are following behind, right? And the reason why we have those in place as well is because as you start to grow and you start to build your team, those values then become your North Star for who's going to actually come on board, right? And so we're really big about making sure you're only hiring A players, top talent. And the only way to do that is having a good mission, vision, and value statement behind it.
Give us some examples, because I think most people who get started, their values are, hey, I want to make money. That's their starting value. But what separates, like, what is a more successful or optimized mission statement that you've seen out there?
Honestly, I think one of the best ones that I've seen is Keller Williams with their mission statement. And I don't have it memorized off the top of my head, but it's to empower homeowners. It's something to the effect of it's to empower homeowners to move on to the next chapter of their life, and being there when they need that help, right? So just something very basic, but something that, is more, a mission statement's more geared toward, like, you'd want to put it on your website for this is something that, your consumers that, can actually see, right?
Is it a very succinct one-liner that just kind of sums up what you're all about?
Yeah, basically.
What would be a good flipper wholesaler one mission, value, purpose statement?
So one I've seen that I liked a lot was to improve the neighborhoods in which we live in, to where, the folks that live in the neighborhood want to grow and prosper, right? So something very basic to that effect. Yeah, so that's just one that comes to mind that I've seen I liked a lot.
So we're talking about really a very succinct one-liner that sums up, which isn't easy to come up with. So it requires some thought. What was the next phase that you brought out there?
It was the vision, the 5-year vision that we're talking about. So we always start off with what's our 1-year vision, 3 years, 5 years, and 10 years out. Not a lot of people know this, but Toyota actually has a 100-year vision for what they wanted their business to look like. So it does take a lot of time and thought to put in behind it. And usually when we're working with our fractional COO clients, that's actually one of the first things we start off is like, okay, where do you want to go? Because the vision is going to allow us to then back into the goals that you have. And then from the goals that we have now, we're going to start to be able to break down piece by piece, month by month, quarter by quarter. How are we going to get to that to hit those goals, right? So vision might be something like, Steve Trang he's another influencer, has a really good one. He's like, my goal is to create 100 millionaires, right? So with his podcast and his training program. So it's something that's focused on not just you as the owner, but the people that work with you and for you, but also for your clients as well. So it's more internally focused, though, I would say. But so like that's probably the best example I could think of. It's also something very short, right? But then the other part of it too is like, what's a 1-year, 3-year, 5-year, 10-year vision out? And we just start with one and then we back into it. So if you're having trouble coming up with what your vision is, think about, we call it writing a January letter, right? So you write a letter to yourself, come January, 12 months from now. Normally people sit down around that time of year anyway to start kind of planning out their goals and things of that nature. And it's like, what do you want what do you want your life to look like? What do you want your business to look like? Right. And then from there, that becomes your vision. And then we condense it down, to something that's very easy to explain to others.
How important is having that vision and that goal, that 1 year, 3-year, 5-year? Because I would think a lot of people are just kind of playing it as it goes along. I mean, this is kind of what I've seen is that people get into real estate investing and they're sort of like shooting fish in a barrel or something. They're not really sure what their goal is. I mean, but once they do define that, what changes can they expect?
What we've seen is that everybody starts to row in the same direction on the team, right? So it's otherwise everybody, it's like if you're in a rowboat and you've got a whole bunch of people rowing different, not in sync, it just starts to go around in a circle. And that's common for what we see in a lot of companies that don't have that. And to your point, you made a statement earlier about a lot of people are like, I'm just in it for the money. And we've seen that exactly the same thing. A lot of times people say, I just want to make, $1 million a year net. Well, that's great. But what about the other people on your team? What do they want to do, right? The vision is deeper than just you as the business owner. We actually go a couple layers deeper than that, and we interview every single person on the team to make sure, hey, what do you want your life to look like, right? What do you want your life to look like in 1, 3, 5 years? And then the goal is that can you, one, fit into the vision that we have overall for the company, right? But two, can the company serve you to help you get where you want to go as well? So there's a great book called The Dream Manager, and I think it's by Matthew Kelly, if I'm not mistaken, where he talks about that and focusing on your employees and the people that work for you and where they want to go in their life will just naturally, exponentially help the growth that you're going to have. So we talked a lot about servant leadership, and the servant leadership really starts with what's that vision that you have, and then what's the vision that your employees have as well.
At what point does a chief operating officer come in? I mean, how do you know if you're at that point where you need a chief operating officer or a COO? And why would you bring them in the first place?
It really depends on kind of what level you're at in your business, right? So, initially right off, where we talk about, there's levels to this game, right? So like level 0, you might be a newbie. You're just starting to learn about the business and having conversations with sellers. Level 1, you're kind of in that startup phase, right? You might have a virtual assistant, maybe a couple of phone reps, something of that nature. It's just you, and you're making offers, and you're doing the thing, right? You're doing a lot of the work yourself. Level 2 is kind of where we get to what we call the growth phase. That's when it's like we're starting to build the team out. We're building a playbook. We're negotiating deals. So let's just get clear about something real quick. A COO in the real estate business it's more of a vanity term than anything else. We're not Fortune 500 level businesses, right? We're not running super complex operations in most cases. Real estate's actually a pretty simple business. The execution's what's hard. My mentor, Tom Kroll, always liked to say, business is simple, but owners are hard. And so we like to try and focus on keeping things simple. So usually at that level 2 growth phase is when it's time to start hiring like an executive assistant, right? And level 2, that's where you're maybe hiring an acquisition manager, a lead manager, maybe somebody to help with marketing and things of that nature as well. So that's usually when it comes time to do that. What I like to tell people is when you start to feel like your mental and your physical bandwidth of what you can do day to day in your business is starting to get such to the point where you're starting to feel that burnout, that's when it's time to bring on an executive assistant, right? Maybe even just a hair before that, because you've already got stuff in your business to where if you're doing it more than once, we should be able to create some systems and processes around those to help take some of those things off of your plate.
You use the term executive assistant. Is that the same thing as a COO, or how are they different?
No, so an executive assistant is really more like startup, it's more of like an entry level position. So an executive assistant is basically just to be there to like a catch all for the owner of the company, or for the CEO, if you want to call it that. So we like to call it like a visionary management system. So if you ever read the book Traction, there's visionaries and then there's integrators. You're looking for somebody who's more of an integrator, where you, as the visionary, can come up with the strategy, the ideas. You're the big picture thinker and everything like that, and then it's up to the integrator to basically take all of that and condense it down into something that's actually manageable, right? And that can actually be put into action and implementation. So executive assistant is really more like start off as like entry level position, and that's really just helping manage your day to day, your inbox, your calendar, your meetings, travel arrangements. They might be helping with, personal and household appointments, managing vendors. And as you start to grow up in those different levels, they can take on some additional responsibilities, such as recruiting efforts and maybe some new employee onboarding. A big one that's really important is making sure that they understand how to create weekly and monthly reports for you, especially out of your financial system that you're using. Maybe even doing some basic bookkeeping for you. And then the big one is going to be they need to understand how to do process mapping and creating written SOPs. So that way, because let's be honest, like nobody's probably going to stay in your business as long as you are, right? So you have to have SOPs in place, and there needs to be somebody on the team who's what we like to call the SOP champion.
SOPs being standard operating procedures.
Mm-hmm.
And when you say process mapping, that's the same thing. It's like, what are the processes? Let's write it out. A, B, C, all the way through Z as to the step-by-step how things are done.
Exactly. Yeah. And we tell folks, if you have to do something more than once, the very easiest thing to do is get a program like Loom or Scribe or something like that. Very cheap. I think it's like 10 to 15 bucks a month. And then just anytime you do something more than once, you click the screen recording and then you start explaining what you're doing, right? One thing that you're doing, one task, make an explanation for it. And then you send that over to your executive assistant, and then it's up to them to put a structure in place and write that out. And so that way now you're starting to slowly build your SOP playbook over time, right? And the goal with the SOP playbook is then that becomes your operating system, your OS for running your business. That way anybody can come in off the street that, if they're ideally at least competent, then they should be able to run it. So a business is really just a collection of systems that are run by other people, right? So, and ideally to make a profit. So that's what it is. It's just an operating system.
I'd like to take a moment to tell you about Green Property Management. Not only do they manage everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area, they also manage my entire portfolio. So I can tell you from personal experience that their unique flat fee management style is worth a closer look. If you feel that your property isn't operating to its fullest potential, then Green Property Management can help you take a holistic approach that will save you money, eliminate your headaches, and increase your net income. And if you're a property manager interested in applying Green Property Management's model, give them a call at 1-866-95-GREEN or visit them on the web at greenpropertymgt.com. If you're thinking of leaving your W-2 job and becoming a full-time real estate investor, one of the greatest costs you must consider is healthcare for you and your family. When I made this transition myself, I found the whole healthcare insurance process to be confusing and frustrating. That's why I'm glad I met Chad Creasy at RCB and Associates. Chad is a professional health insurance agent who helps real estate investors and small business owners understand and choose their best healthcare options. And best of all, his services are covered by the insurance company and won't cost you a dime. If you live in Michigan and are expecting a change in your healthcare insurance coverage for any reason, or losing employer coverage or transitioning into Medicare, then you owe it to yourself to contact Chad Creasy at rcbassociatesllc.com. Save the date for the Midwest Real Estate Investor Conference happening April 24th and 25th of 2025 in Grand Rapids, Michigan. This event is the perfect place to connect with fellow real estate investors, gain valuable insights, and elevate your real estate game. With a lineup of expert speakers and numerous networking opportunities, you won't want to miss it. What is the goal with the executive assistant? They're helping you build the SOPs, the standard operating procedures. Are they, is part of the goal just making them redundant? So if they move on to something else or move up in the organization, someone else can step right into their place?
That's part of it, right? But the bigger goal is, especially as you're starting out and you're starting to scale your company up a little bit, is really to protect your time more than anything else. So I know when I brought on my first executive assistant, they easily saved me at least 20 hours a week. So, and now they're to the point where it's like they're doing 40, 50 hours a week worth of work that I used to be doing myself. And so what we do is we try to get owners to do it every 6 months or so, what we call a time study. So in a time study is just over the course of 7 days, you write down for every 15 minutes, what's that one thing you did during that time? Doesn't matter if it's a personal thing or a business thing. But then what we'll do is we go through that, or you should be going through that with your executive assistant. And you should be applying $1 per hour value to each one of those tasks or those things that you're doing on there. If it's anything as an owner that's less than a $500 an hour task, and we consider a $500 an hour task being something that's like a senior leadership type of position, something that's overall working on strategy, moving the company forward, everything else that's under $500 an hour, that should be delegated to somebody else on your team, right? So as you're creating an organizational chart for your company, in most cases, you're going to be sitting in most of those seats initially, but over time, as you start to create a delegation list from that time study, your EA can then say, okay, well, we've got an empty hole here. We need to save a little bit of time for you in this section. Let's go ahead and find somebody else who can come in and do that. And it makes it really easy to create that delegation list for your EA to create that delegation list.
What are the 20 to 40 hours a week that your executive assistant is taking off of your plate?
Tons of data entry, billing, accounting, bookkeeping stuff, running payroll, managing my calendar and scheduling meetings for me. Let's see, she's in charge of all of our hiring processes now as well. So when it comes to sourcing candidates, doing the first round interviews, things of that nature, helping clean up our CRM. I mean, basically anything and everything you could possibly think of, she's capable of doing it. So again, she's that backstop for me. So that way, if there's something like if I'm too busy to do something or I'm focused on a really high level task, she's the one to kind of take that up for me. And that allows me as the owner to then go focus on selling my business, selling other people, like having the networking opportunities that I otherwise wouldn't be able to have because I was too in the weeds over time.
What kind of improvement do the people you work with see in their business when they do bring on an executive assistant?
It's huge. If they really focus and do kind of everything like we just talked about, the 7-day time study, which we also do what's called an energy audit with that. It's like, because we really want to focus on, for you as the owner, what are the things that you're really, really good at that you love to do? So essentially, if you showed up to work and even if you weren't getting paid for it, you would still do it because you love it. We kind of call that your genius zone. So you want the owner to be stuck in their genius zone, doing the things that they love and delegate everything else off of their plate, right? When owners actually do that, we've seen them in some cases be able to increase over the course of a year their revenue by more than 50%. And I don't want to say, we have had some clients, this is more of like a, an outlier, but they 2x, and we have one guy 3x his business over the course of a year. But I would say anywhere from 30 to 50%, growth over the course of the year just by having an executive assistant. So when somebody tells me that, hey, I can't afford this person, I ask them, like, how can you not afford to have somebody, right? Because they're actually going to save you so much time and they actually should be able to make you money. And quite frankly, if they don't make you at least 5 times what their annual salary is, then either there's something wrong with how you train them or maybe you just have the wrong person, right? But it's a massive impact that it has on people's business.
There's that psychological thing of people who might hire an executive assistant, but don't want to give up the responsibilities that they feel they're the only ones capable of doing.
That happens a lot. Yeah. And they're afraid of doing that. But it's also a part of it too, is like they're afraid because they don't know how to train somebody. Right. And so we see that's one side of the coins where people are too afraid because they're control freaks. Like I was a control freak initially in my own business. But once you start to get over that and you have to inspect what you expect. Right. So that's true delegation in that sense. Once you understand how to truly delegate, then it becomes a lot easier to kind of let go. The opposite end of the spectrum that you want to be careful of is you don't want to bring somebody on and then just throw a bunch of stuff at them and say, here, you go figure it out, right? And we see that happen sometimes as well. And it's like, nope, we got to backtrack a little bit here and like, let's put a process in place for how we train these people. That's called abdication, not delegation. And if you just abdicate, you're giving up your responsibilities. And for a lot of visionaries, that's a relatively common thing to do. So but that's also the most dangerous, I would say.
Let's talk about COO, as Chief Operating Officer. Why would you bring them in, and at what point would you bring them in?
For a real estate business, typically I would wait until, like a full-time COO is when you're probably somewhere around that 5 million a year in annual revenue, maybe a little bit more. Actually, most of the people that we work with, they don't start bringing on a full-time COO in-house until they're about 10 million in revenue. So not a lot of folks, hit that level. A lot of people that, are probably in your audience and a lot of the people I talk to, they don't ever really want to get to that level, right? So in most cases, maybe hiring somebody like a fractional COO is a better thing to do. It's cheaper than hiring a full-time COO. And a true COO in the sense of what the name is, they're there to help you implement come up with the strategy and then actually put it into action, right? And then to run the team to make sure that they're all moving in the same direction. So that way you as the owner can focus on what you do best, right? So, and really, once you get to that level, there's really only 3 things that an owner should be doing. It's focus on people, culture, and numbers, right? So building a bench of top talent, of A players, because most businesses have a tendency to be a revolving door, even if some might be 6 months is that people come in and go. Others, it might be 5 years. But either way, you should always be trying to recruit and bring in that top talent, right? So focusing on people and then making sure to build the culture. The owner of the company, it kind of works from the top down. They need to be that culture creator, right? To kind of dictate what that's going to be. Not dictate, but inspire others for what they want the vision of the company to look like, right? And so creating that company culture, being a protector of that company culture. And then the other thing is making sure to watch the numbers, right? And the numbers tell you everything that's going to be going on in your business from a financial standpoint, what's going on in the industry, how do we actually move forward to kind of overcome all the hurdles and weather the storms, as they might be coming in. So when it's time to bring in a COO is when you are tapped out, you don't have the bandwidth to be able to run the entire team yourself, and you need somebody to kind of help run the team while you focus on everything else. And that's why we like to say it's an EA to COO type of progress, path of progress, I guess, if you want to call it that, towards like we want to start them off at the bottom as an EA and then eventually grow them up into maybe like a director of operations type of position. And then once you get to the level of say like $10 million plus, then that's when it's like, okay, now they understand the company at a very high level. They know how to run it. They know every single person. They know what makes them tick, right? And they know how to get them to do what needs to be done to all make sure they're rowing in the same direction.
You mentioned the term fractional COO. Explain what that means.
Fractional COO essentially is somebody who is an experienced COO who's worked in other companies, and they work with multiple different companies, right, on a fractional basis, part-time. So for instance, they might work with 3 to 4 clients, over the course, of a month, and they usually split it up where they're working, 10 to 15 hours a week on each one of those different businesses. And they're really just focused on making sure that they have the high level strategy in place, and that the teams that they're working for have somebody else in place who can do the implementation aspect of what the strategy is that the CEO has come up with. So, and if they don't have it, then that's where a fractional COO can come in and actually do the hiring for the owner of the company and try to find those A players and interview them and make sure that they're going to actually be a good cultural fit. And then making sure that everybody on the team understands each one of their roles. They all have a job description laid out. They're all being held to a standard. And we also meet weekly with every one of the employees typically as well to do one-on-ones. And we check their KPIs, right? And we look and see, okay, how are you doing? What do you need? What are you struggling with? What do you need help with? How can we be of service to you? Right. And like that's the biggest thing. And it's always coming from a place of service more than anything else. So, and really that's why we like to talk about doing bottom up leadership instead of top down. Right. So when we focus on we're here to serve you, everybody else has a tendency to be like, okay, I'm empowered to help grow the organization. And they start to feel a bit of ownership in that as well.
Can you give us some specific examples of COOs and how you've seen them come in and make some dramatic changes within a company?
We have a client right now who's doing a little over $10 million a year right now. They're a relatively large team. I think they have about 25 employees. Well, I say large. For a real estate business, that's relatively large, real estate investing company. Mostly what they do is house flipping and some private lending. And they also have quite a few rentals, and they do some wholesaling as well. So what we've seen with them has been a dramatic turn from being not very profitable, even though they're doing $10 million a year plus, to already just within a couple months, we've changed some of the strategies around. We've made things easier. We've made some pivots with getting rid of some not A players, and then bringing in some A players who can actually do the job at a very high level. And that's made a big impact on their bottom line already, just within a few months. So that's really what we do at the very beginning is we're making sure you have the foundation set. We look at the org chart. We take a look at right butts, right seats, right? Do we have the right people in there? And then from there, it's figuring out, okay, strategy wise, now we know what your vision is. Where are we going to go moving forward from here? And then we come up with a written implementation plan of how we're going to get there. And then we check in with each one of the different team members that are on that team. So the other big part of it too is working with a very competent fractional CFO, so a chief financial officer. And there's a couple of companies out there that I'm happy to recommend if anybody needs that. But that's something that's super important too, because if you don't understand the numbers behind your business, then you don't really have a business, right? You have more of a hobby. And so that's one of the other things that we really focus on heavily at the very beginning is making sure, do you understand what your metrics look like currently? Because if you don't know where you're at, you don't know where you're going to be able to go, So, and then understanding that and helping piece it together, because the fractional CFO will give you the numbers, but they're not going to tell you what the strategy and how to put it in place. That's what the COO is there for, to help kind of read the tea leaves, if you will, and then say, these are the kind of the things that maybe we would recommend that you do for the owner.
If one were looking to hire an executive assistant or a COO, I know you have a solution that I'd love you to share with people. Can you talk a little bit about Let's Grow COO and tell people how they can also find out more about you or get a hold of you?
We have a company called Let's Grow COO. And what we're really focused on is we do fractional COO consulting for those high level, 10 million plus companies. But we have clients who have even brought us in where they're doing $1.5 million to $2 million, who brought us in on a fractional basis. just to help out, for a couple months. But the big thing that we really do a lot more of is actually training executive assistants on how to take over and become that second in command for the company. And I don't even really necessarily like the term COO for anybody in the real estate industry or in really any industry for that matter, because when you start talking about titles, right? Titles have different salaries attached to them, right? So a true COO in a Fortune 500 company might make $500,000 to $700,000 a year, right? So we don't want to have that expectation when we bring somebody on into a real estate company that only has 25 employees, right? So it's really more like a director of operations level who might be, $125,000 to $175,000 a year kind of situation. An executive assistant would be somebody. It's like, okay, we're under $2 million a year, right, in revenue. We're going to bring this person on. They're going to be basically shadowing the owner at all times and being that backstop for him. You can get really top tier talent for that for, starting off at as low as $50,000 a year up to $90,000, maybe even low six figures, right? And eventually they grow over time into that. So there's different ways to go about finding those people. But that's what we specialize in doing, is finding those executive assistants who have that ability to eventually move up and take over the company. Fun fact, actually, I don't know if you knew this, but Gary Keller, who created Keller Williams, his first EA went on to become the CEO of Keller Williams. So, and we love to really try to promote with most of the companies that we work with and really help to grow those people. So that's why we call it Let's Grow COO.
So tell people how they can find out more then about Let's Grow COO and where you would send them.
You can go to rpoa.letsgrowcoo.com. You go to that link, you can book a strategy call there for it with myself or one of my other fractional COOs on the team. And we're just going to go over, talk about your business, where you're at, give some recommendations. There's no cost to it or anything like that. You can also go to letsgrowcoo.co. We're about to move that over to letsgrowcoo.com, but that has more information that you can go to as well. And if anybody has any questions or they want to reach out to me personally, they can text me at 512-757-7467.
What's your favorite hack or app?
My executive assistant runs our, what we call Inbox Zero system. So she manages my email inbox because I hate email with a passion. So she manages that for me, and it makes it super simple for me to go in just twice a day, look at the stuff that's only important for me to look at, and then she handles everything else. So it's a big game changer.
Thanks for coming on the show and talking about COOs and executive assistants, when and why people might want to consider bringing them onto their team. It's been a really enlightening conversation, and I appreciate you having it with us today. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
I want to thank everybody for listening to this episode. I'm your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group, and you can find out more about me by going to higinvestor.com. That's higinvestor.com. And you can also ask questions and join us on Facebook by going to RPOA, Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast. And remember to save the date for the Midwest Real Estate Investor Conference on April 24th and 25th of 2025 in Grand Rapids, Michigan. It's going to be an event you won't want to miss, packed with invaluable sessions and opportunities to connect with like-minded investors. Keep listening for more updates, and we look forward to seeing you there. This episode was sponsored by Green Property Management, managing everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area. Find out more at greenpropertymgt.com. And RCB and Associates, helping real estate investors and small business owners navigate the complex world of health insurance and Medicare benefits at rcbassociatesllc.com.
You've been listening to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association. You can find out more at rpoaonline.org. If you enjoyed this podcast, please go to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and review.